Welcome back, America. I'm Hugh Hewitt inside the Beltway. Day 3 of the Judge Brown Jackson hearings commence soon over at Senate Judiciary. A member of that committee is Senator Tom Cotton. He joins me now. Good morning, Senator. Thank you for joining us. What did you make? By the way, I thought your exchange with her on the sentencing of the heroin fentanyl dealer was quite remarkable. She said there were no identifiable victims. I mean, you thought of the children in the house, but you also pointed out drug abuse, drug sale is not a victimless crime. I'm still stunned by that. Heroin laced with fentanyl is a weapon of mass destruction, Senator.
Yeah, good morning, Hugh. It's good to be on with you. I thought that my exchange with Judge Jackson, specifically the exchange about the drug kingpin, Keith Young, whom she sentenced and then resentenced, was very telling. It goes to show that she's soft on crime. She's an activist who has spent her entire career advocating on behalf of criminals, trying to seek weaker sentences and weaker criminal laws for them. Let me just lay out what happened in Keith Young's case. This man was a career criminal. He had had multiple convictions. He came in front of her court in 2018. He faced a 20-year mandatory minimum for having heroin laced with fentanyl in a home where he had his own children. The judge expressed her frustration that she had to impose a mandatory minimum. She even apologized to this drug kingpin that she had to impose the mandatory minimum. Well, fast forward 2 years to 2020. Keith Young comes back to her court, and he has filed, under the First Step Act, something called a motion for compassionate release. That means immediate release, Hugh, it was for elderly and terminally ill inmates. Keith Young was neither of those. And I'll give her this. She denied the motion for compassionate early release. He was not eligible for it under the First Step Act. But then, Hugh, she took it a step further. She transformed that into a motion to reduce his sentence under the First Step Act by 7.5 years. And, Hugh, the law that she cited was not retroactive. It was specifically not made retroactive by Congress. Yet she felt it was unfair that he had a 20-year sentence because he was sentenced before the First Step Act, and others who committed the same crime got a shorter sentence after the First Step Act.
Yeah, Senator, if I understand correctly,
rewrote the law.
If I understand, it's a sua sponte motion on her part. If you move to reduce on the basis of compassion and that's rejected as she did, then there's no motion before the court. So she is doing it on her own initiative. Am I correct?
Yes, Hugh, because she said, and she, remember, in 2018, she expressed her frustration that she had to sentence this fentanyl kingpin to 20 years. She apologized to him. And then 2 years later, she gleefully celebrated that he was back in front of her as if it was a first sentencing. And rather, she did not give him the compassionate release. Remember, Hugh, that's an immediate release from prison, release from prison for elderly and terminally ill inmates. He obviously did not qualify that, and she did not give it to him, but she converted it, sua sponte, of her own accord, to a motion to reduce his sentence years from now by 7.5 years, because for 2 years she had pouted that she had to give him a 20-year mandatory minimum. It goes to show that she is an activist on behalf of hardened criminals, and she always has been.
Now, I listen to these things very closely as a con law professor, and that just struck me that she had to do that ab initio on her own initiative, sua sponte. And the other one, when Mike Lee starts talking about the Dormant Commerce Clause, I might be the only person in America who's listening, but the other exchange was Senator Cruz on critical race theory. What is a Georgetown day school board member supposed to do if not know what's in the curriculum, Senator?
Well, you would think that the board members of any private school would be reviewing the curriculum, especially things that are highly controversial, like critical race theory. The liberals, like Judge Jackson, have been saying for years, like, oh, this is a graduate school and law school seminar theory, and it's not exposed to children. That's funny because charlatans like Ibram X. Kendi, who have gotten famous and wealthy peddling such racist nonsense, have books out entitled How to Be an Anti-Racist Baby. Obviously, the far left is trying to indoctrinate children down to kindergarten to hate America and to judge each other by the color of their skin, not the content of their character, as Dr. Martin Luther King had it. And Judge Jackson was totally oblivious that this was happening at her school. And she has, in fact, cited in the past that she relies on critical race theory as she goes forward in sentencing, because she thinks it's such a fascinating combination of things like criminal law and administrative law and critical race theory. So her answers yesterday about critical race theory were simply not credible.
Senator, I am not a senator, and I didn't stay at a Holiday Inn last night, and I'm not on the Judiciary Committee. But if I were, I would begin with, how often did the board meet? What year did you join? How often did you attend the board meetings that were scheduled? Did CRT or any controversy surrounding CRT-derived materials or teachers influenced by CRT ever come up in any board meeting? And if so, what was the conversation? I'd move deposition because it's not just her problem. It's a problem on every school board in America, private and public. Now, on the public side, it's unconstitutional to have race. But on the private side, it's astonishing. Do you see yourself focusing on that or on criminal law today, or what do you expect yourself to be doing today?
Well, Hugh, we have another long day ahead of us here. I still have some questions about her views on criminal law and sentencing and other matters. I'm sure, though, that there's going to be a fuller exploration of her role as a board member and whether or not she was aware of what her school was teaching and supported it, or whether she was negligent in that role and that she was not aware of what her school was teaching. Neither one is particularly, a good look for a judge.
No, it's not. They're both actually. I had the over-under at 65 until yesterday. I dropped it to 53 because I also think Josh Hawley's discussion of child porn, where she lets an 18-year-old in possession of child porn involving 8 and 10-year-old boys being raped, to 3 months. Senator, my jaw dropped.
I know. It's amazing. And she apologized, again, Hugh, in the hearing with that criminal defendant, she apologized to him. She apologized to this 18-year-old man who was in possession of material of child rape, Hugh. She apologized that she had to sentence him even to 3 months in prison, which was vastly lower than the recommended sentence under the guidelines.
Yeah.
Hugh, there was a lot of back and forth on this question yesterday. It may have been confusing to some people. Here's the bottom line. There are a lot of elite lawyers in America, judges like Judge Jackson, even some federal prosecutors, definitely federal public defenders, definitely law professors, who think criminal sentences for child pornography are too harsh. Not many Americans do, and I certainly don't. And what Judge Jackson consistently did when she had child pornography cases was use her discretion as the sentencing judge to recommend one of the lowest sentences possible. Now, if I were the judge and I had that discretion, I'd probably throw the book at the child pornographer. Maybe that's just me, but I suspect it's not just me. I suspect it's most Americans as well.
Well, what I think was missing by some of the people who accused Senator Hawley and others of, being QAnon responsive, which is an idiotic charge, but because child pornography is a massive plague on the world, does she believe that consumers of child porn create the market which incentivizes people to make it? Because that is the causal element that I don't think anyone brought to the surface, which is if you're consuming it, if you're downloading it, if you're watching it, you've created the market for it, and you are incriminated in the production of it. That's my view of the marketplace, Senator. Do you share that or disagree with that?
Well, Hugh, I don't think that's really your view. That's just the basic law of economics, of supply and demand. Of course, if there's more demand for anything, to include criminal material, to include the most heinous criminal material, there's going to be more supply of it. But I doubt that she would even agree to that, Hugh. Yesterday, I asked her, does she think that there will be more or less crime if criminals are more likely to be caught, convicted, and sentenced? And she wouldn't even acknowledge that, Hugh, a very common sense proposition. She acknowledged that deterrence is one of the purposes of punishment, and that there's theories and research that support that. But she wouldn't actually acknowledge that deterrence works, that good policing and tough sentences works to reduce crime, because she is a far-left activist who always takes the side of criminals.
You know, Senator, I began yesterday thinking 65 votes because she's a liberal, not a leftist. I'm down to 53 as the over-under because she's a leftist. That's far left of liberal. I judged Attorney General Barr on Monday talking about this. Do you think do you think there are any members of the conference that will vote for her after yesterday's testimony?
Boy, Hugh, I think that'd be a very tough vote for most of our peers. I'd probably put the line at 49.5 and hope for the under.
Okay. Yeah, I really don't know how you get over your exchange there was no identifiable victim. I think you were stunned by that. I was watching live, and you paused for a minute, and you said, there are no victimless crimes. And she genuinely believes if you haven't got a body, you haven't got a victim. 2 pounds of heroin laced with fentanyl. Did she not get any testimony from victims groups on what that means?
Well, she could have easily done that. She could have easily gone to the organizations that represent the families of overdose victims. But she obviously didn't want to do that to you. Remember, this is a career criminal, a fentanyl kingpin, who she apologized to when she sentenced him in 2018 because she thought 20 years was too tough, but the law bound her to sentence him to 20 years. And then 2 years later, when she gets him back in front of her courtroom on a completely extraneous, unrelated motion that she denies, she decides that she's just going to lop 7.5 years off his sentence. Years ago, she's going to get out of prison 7.5 years earlier because she thought the law was too tough to sentence this fentanyl kingpin to 20 years in prison.
I have a constitutional bias towards confirming qualified judges. And obviously, you're the kid on the committee because she and Ted Cruz were palling it up at Harvard Law School. But honest to God, what were they teaching you there? She gave a speech at my alma mater, Michigan Law, which got into the record yesterday. But what goes on at Harvard Law School? Honestly, what do they teach up there?
Well, Hugh, a lot of what they teach in many classes is the kind of radical views you saw yesterday, that criminal law is inherently racist and it's a system of oppression. They teach you that criminals deserve our sympathy and that we should view the world from their standpoint. I mean, look at some of the transcripts of these child pornography cases or the case with the fentanyl kingpin. She openly expresses her regret that she has to impose longer sentences on them than she wishes. So she feels bad for them. And what do you remember when for them in the future?
When Justice Gorsuch was up and they made the frozen trucker case the headline? Now, though, that you're focused on specific cases, you are being accused of playing to QAnon. You are being accused of playing to the far right on crime and race. You got 1 minute, Senator. What do you make of those accusations that you're playing to QAnon and to far right supremacists?
Hugh, the only thing that I'm raising are what concerns every American in the middle of a crime wave, that Joe Biden and the Democratic Party have been releasing hundreds of thousands of violent and serious felons from prison, that they want to eliminate the bail system so violent felons don't even stay in it, that they want to reduce sentences so future convicts don't go to trial so much, that they want to defund the police, that they nominate judges like Judge Jackson to the courts that apologize to child pornographers and fentanyl kingpins for having to sentence them to longer sentences than they desire. For every mom and dad who's worried about their kid walking to school and facing crime or overdosing on drugs, or worried about the quality of their public parks, and you have criminals hanging around them, I think yesterday was very eye-opening for the kinds of judges that Joe Biden has been nominating, not just this judge of the Supreme Court, but on down to every court in America. And I think the American people are going to express their dissatisfaction with the Democrats' soft on crime policies this November.
I agree with you, and on the CRT school board races. Senator Cotton, thank you. Follow him on Twitter at Rep. Tom Cotton. Watch these hearings. Stay tuned.